to everybody. My name is Massi. This is Born to Ferment. And today we have another special guest, Michele Reina, European brand ambassador of Luxco at MGP Brands. Michele, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you, Max. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Today is probably the only day in the year that you're gonna see me sweat, and it's not just because I'm really excited to be here. It's because it's hot and sunny in London, so we are close to the end of the world. It's
Exactly.
scary when it's like that. Yeah,
I
that's good.
remember. I remember the one of the hottest London sunny and summers. It was when the Italy won the World Cup, and I was in London cheering like crazy. And I remember it was like 30 degrees for like 20 days, and we thought the world changed because that was
Yeah,
normal Italian weather, and it was so
yeah.
funny because I've seen that in the last few.
I lost you there, Massi. So I'm not quite sure if it's Massi that's gone or it's me that's gone. We might have some technical challenging, which is good. It's always happen. That's a sign that it's still everything to normal, even though it's hot and sunny. Right. So I think Massi will join us soon, which is it's good because anyway this was a bit improvised on my side, even because I thought we were going to have a bit of a conversation about fermentation in general, and I cannot say that I'm not actually a fermenter. I don't describe myself as fermenter. As Massi suggests, I work for NGP and Luxco, which is a lot of fermentation up there. Consider that we are involved in the production of tequila, gin, and especially American whiskey. We do even Irish whiskey, which is good because it brings us together to the two different between fermented, what is called the distilled beer, one with the wort and one with the sour mash. I personally really curious, and I believe that's what is bringing me a bit close to the fermentation, because I always been an extremely one of those bartenders that wanted to see the source and understand not necessarily the hyper complicated chemistry behind, but at least the principle behind what the production is and the final product is, and all the different detail that might change the final result. So also, what I was mentioned to Massi, I used to have my own company with my partner, George Billing, and we used to do tailor-made ingredient for cocktail bar. This one was our logo. This one here, for instance, Campi Elisi, is a liqueur made only with grain, sort of remind this grain field, which was the paradise of the gladiator called Campi Elisi back then. But then we used to do a lot of things that was involved in fermentation as well. We did an interesting passito wine with beetroot and carrots. We did a pear cider vermouth, so a sort of cider, from pear fruits, but then with the additional of different spice and then fortify with natural grain spirit to make sure as well we stop the fermentation or sort of changing the aspect of the product where we were happy with that. And we did quite a lot of bitter, which I believe it was the start of the company. Consider then we managed to reach about 100 different type of flavor or bitter back then, and we're talking about 7 or 8 years ago, when homemade bitter it was start to be a thing, but definitely to have 100 different homemade bitter in the bar, it was quite unique. And we realized there was a lot of bartenders that were interested in the product and they didn't have the time or the knowledge to do it. So the idea of the company was to do it for them and just wish them luck in competition, or do a tailor-made ingredient for their cocktail bar to have it on their menu, and then their own unique vermouth. Choose the botanicals of their bathtub gin or sort. Massi, welcome back.
Hey, I'm back. Believe it or not, I'm hosting this podcast, and I was just disappeared for a while.
That's all right.
I'm so sorry.
I took the show from you. I'm sorry.
That's amazing. You are employed. You have the job. You can start from next week to running 3 times a week. I'm in. You also entertain pretty well, I guess. What you guys have been talking about?
Well, I'm actually even on the other side now. I'm in the side of the
the controller.
Exactly.
I just love the podcast.
It's good to have you in my show, Massi.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's for me really an honor to be here. I heard about
it's an honor to having you, Massi.
It's a really good idea, guys, that you have to create a fermentation podcast. I think it will help a lot of bartenders and chefs out there. Also, actually, normal people that would like to start fermenting, because that's our aim. It's getting the word of fermentation out, and people will ferment just much more.
Well, I'm glad that you exactly caught the soul of our program, and you appreciate what we're doing. And it's thanks to people like you then we aspire.
That this podcast exists. That's exactly true. Sorry, guys. That's the beauty of the live streaming. Sometimes, sometimes you go, sometimes you come. But anyway, Michele, this is all about you. It's not about me. People has been here. I've been here, my boys, for quite a while. So I would like more to get depth. Why you are born to ferment, buddy? What do you get? How do you get out fermentation? How do you get in? Also, I know that you're a very, very knowledgeable person about fermentation in rye and bourbon category, which is the one of the main reason why you here. Because to be honest, I know a few things about sour mash and how this kind of things happen, and I've been in many distilleries, but I don't know as much as you do know on depth. And I would like to just give you the talk. I know you've been talking for 5 minutes before I came back, but I want to hear too.
Well, thank you, Massi. But I was just finished to give a lot of credit to myself already, because I was improvising on the show, and I was explaining a bit how I started it to get into that fermentation. And at the beginning, to be fair, was more like extraction of flavor, and infusion, which I believe is it's really different from fermentation and distillation. Fermentation for me is it's a magic word that I personally not completely understand, and that's why fascinates me, because the way that I see fermentation is, and it might sound a bit silly, but that scene in Men in Black when they open the cabinet, and there is the god that give it the watch to the little. Yeah, exactly. You start something and you don't know, where those those living things might actually get tomorrow. It just and I love that. But
which is the same thing that the first time they gave me a SCOBY, I was actually in Manchester, and this bartender friend of mine, and we were working together. He was like, "Oh man, I grew this," and I was like, "Wow, that's fucking disgusting." And he was like, "That was my first thing, I didn't know what he was talking about." So I was like, "What the fuck is this, man? This is that was this." I was like, "Oh man, this is really good. It actually is really good for your gut." I'm like, okay. I was really into distillation actually at the time,
Yeah.
And it was so funny because after when now I have like 13 scobies, and I need to look after all of them, name them, you know.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing, right?
Well, the first time I actually saw the Scooby was my girlfriend Georgia. She's a doctor from Cambridge. So in
Yeah,
terms of chemistry behind, she helped me a lot when when I want to put my head inside something that is way bigger than me.
of course.
And sometimes she helped me, sometimes she confused me even more. But she was the first to start doing kombucha home, and show me those little flat head alien, in the
Exactly.
kitchen. Yeah.
Exactly. Also, because
uh,
for us, like, fermentation word for Italians it's never been such a big cultural thing, right? We
no,
are
I believe
we
no.
are getting there. I was actually having a great conversation with Flavio Sasso, which is like the episode fifth or sixth, and and he's insane. Like, he's so good on the world of fermentation because he's been studying them all his life. And we were talking about this. We were talking about, how the fermentation roots are actually in the Italian community, but because they're so forgotten, that now we kind of rediscovering,
Yeah.
how actually this is good for your health and actually good for the world in general, sustainable programs, which I believe also that's something that bartenders go into fermentation so much because of this little point. We can become very sustainable, right?
Yeah, and I agree with you. It is actually in the very base of our roots and our tradition, especially about food. And then for some reason, which I believe is it's a bit like well, to say in a really unpolite way, we start to eat crap, and that's why we forgot about all the origin of the fermentation for our culture. The only thing that left was wine and beer,
Absolutely.
which fair enough, we are famous for it, but there was so much more before,
Absolutely.
and
And
yeah,
also, the way of digesting fermentation, not just through alcohol, which is makes it, a daily need. Because sometimes, that's, in my opinion, the huge difference between, and now you see, like, for instance, if you think about how many people cook at home and how many people drink at home, people have been cooking at home forever because it's a need. You gotta eat to survive, right? Drinking, it's totally different.
yeah,
To be honest, though, in the last year, because a lot of lockdowns and people couldn't go in bars. I don't know if that happened there in UK, but here, man, it's insane. Like, people are getting pretty fucking good at this.
yeah,
We hosting actually a lot of master classes. Is a new program that we did. We started 6 months ago because one big company approached us and they were like, "Oh man, I want to do some drinks and live." It's like, "Oh, this is a good business model." So now we're having a lot of classes, and you should see how many people they know exactly what they're talking about. I don't know, Miguel, how long you'll be bartending, but I've been bartending for 20 years. 20 years ago, this was a dream. Like,
yeah,
they were coming to the bar and drink at the bar. They were never a part of vodka, tonic, gin and tonic, of course, in UK, but it would never say my favorite old fashioned twist is, and you just go, wow,
yeah.
and I think it's great. I think fermentation could become that, and that's, I believe, it's our goal. So,
Yeah,
little
I
question.
believe it's already on the way because people are more aware about what they drink, but people are more aware about what they eat as well. We are in the new healthy era, and I believe especially during lockdown, people realize, okay, well, we can't go to the restaurant. People can't cook for
Of
us the
course.
lovely food that we like. We might as well try,
Absolutely.
and yeah, and me and my girlfriend, we have this homemade Sunday pasta, and on
Beautiful.
Sunday, we do like gnocchi, lasagne, parmigiana. We just fill the freezer of goodness,
And you got
because
food
then
for
on
the
the rest of
entire
the week,
week.
yeah, it just at least you have a easy, fast, food that is actually healthy. You know what's
Absolutely.
inside, and people start to understand, the meaning of taking care of their body. It's a lot of
Like, for
meditation and yoga class and fermentation
absolutely.
carrying along.
And I do really think that even, business people or people that they actually pro, this kind of craze of production food, and like, actually not thinking about what they're eating, they will slowly change because they will understand that this is actually doesn't take so much time. If you organize yourself, or if you're super busy, you don't want to do it, you can buy things that they actually fermented. So we go back to reinvesting and spending the money where they should go, instead of buy ketchup and mayonnaise or things that we with really they're slowly disappearing, on my opinion. Maybe sometimes it's also our world, because food and drinks, restaurants and bars, now they're using fermentation so much that it's one of those things that we believe that fermentation is the biggest thing. Sometimes when you see all the world, you're like, okay, why those guys that don't use any of these techniques? Because they're too busy making money, or they're too busy working crazy hours. We work crazy hours too, to be honest, but we are in the world. I do think that in the few next years, because of the health properties and what the world has been through in the past couple of years, things will really, 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 really change. But anyway, you're a bartender. How did you start working? Where did you start working? How did you get into fermentation, bourbon, rye? How did you get into this, Michele?
Okay,
I'll take back the show now. Okay.
Yeah. So I believe I didn't start working. I start in the industry before I was actually able to consider myself a worker. I start as an apprentice or a student. My father was an hotel director. So some people might say, "Oh, you're a son of art." No, I was really unlucky to work with my parents, and people that did that they can understand me.
I did. So I
Yeah,
totally
and then
understand.
I moved to London, and the idea was, okay, I need to go there. I want to understand what's going on, learn a language, maybe a couple of years, and then move on. And that was about 11 years ago. And I realized that London is such an opportunity, and there was a lot of influence for different culture around the world that I didn't really need to move any further.
No.
Yeah, and and bartending for me, it was the perfect mix of everything I learned in the hotel, because my father make me move from every single department, and try to understand completely the food service. So from the kitchen preparing the food to the floor to serving, and see the service of the the floor, and then in the reception to organize event and so on. And you have all of that in a cocktail bar.
Absolutely. And man, can I tell you another thing? The new bartenders that they don't have this structure, you see that there's a huge difference, because like nowadays there's a lot of Instagram bartenders which they have a lot of followers, but as soon as you put them in a bar, or now it's time to work 13 hours a day, now it's time to prepare your mise en place, now it's time to understand where you are and how to actually run this place, they have a lot of problems. And the reason why is because it's all about the picture and how the drinks looks like.
Yeah, no, I completely understand, and I couldn't be more agreed. We nowadays we struggle to find hospitality person. People call themselves bartender, mixologists, all the fancy title that you want, but we forgot what it's actually all about. It's about hospitality. It's about sweating your ass off if you need to. Be the machine man if you have to. Be the engagement, sort of clown in the, of the show if you have to.
Exactly.
And be the knowledgeable person behind if you have to. You have to be 360, and you can't just choose one style and promote, everything out of it, because now the virtual world allow you to just work with your followers, and your profile.
Exactly. But the followers at the end of the day, apart if you become a person that is so big on Instagram or so big on social network that you can make a living out of it, they call influencers, which is a new job. And I actually respect a lot of influencers out there, because that's their job as much as we make drinks. But if you want to be a bartender, or I would say forget about bartending, if you want to be a person in this industry that makes the difference, you cannot just make drinks for Instagram. You need to actually understand how this is work. And the old guard, like your father, my mom, people that they run different businesses in the way they used to be run before, they teach you that. Now that we gotta evolve and understand that Instagram, it's a very good tool, it's a strong tool, and it's beautiful, to be honest, because you got some amazing pictures. I'm talking Instagram. I can say LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn, for instance. I'm a big fan because I think it's evolving in a way that I really like it, because it's just professionals, but also people that really care about businesses, and personal CEO, owner of small businesses. There's a lot going on there, in my opinion. But at the same time, now we need those tools to help us to promote ourselves. And if you do have a good product and a good structure, I think the amazing benefit for your bar.
Yeah, and as long we understand that there are tools, as you describe it, that's great. And I'm not jealous at all. Sometimes I actually I couldn't think even close to do influencer as a job, because I just love too much the interaction with people.
Same.
I like the present moment. I like to to just give everything I have to a personal relation, and that's
Absolutely.
what I miss the most, in my in my
I
job,
guess
in a
I
way.
guess the last year was a bit of a problem on that. So,
Oh yes,
but
yeah.
I do think that you're totally right. Like I do all the social for my bar, so I'm on the socials every day. I'm doing the marketing, and I do love marketing, to be honest. But at the same time, I would imagine if I have to do that times, 4 or 5 times a day, looking for, I don't know. But at the same time, I believe it's a job, and it's something that if someone wants to do it, thanks God, actually, some of those that do it because they promote what we're doing, right? Um,
Yeah.
how did you get into fermentation? How did you get into bourbon and rye, which is more important, I believe, right?
Yeah. So getting to fermentation, I believe I was one of the those really curious bartender back then, and I mentioned that I used to make a lot of bitter, a lot of vermouth, homemade liqueur, amari, and reduction and so on, which nowadays everyone can do it. Even a consumer, an average consumer that actually is really into cocktail, and follows some really interesting YouTube channel and so on. They actually know the basic on an extraction of flavor by infusion,
Amazing.
and all the rest. But when we're talking about 8 years ago, it wasn't a thing. It was just starting to the scene of homemade bitter and so on. And I used to manage this bar with my partner Georgia Billing and Tommaso Cicala, another incredible bartender. And we used to have these two silver tray full of bitter, and we used to have 100 different flavor of bitter homemade, which it was a lot, obviously. And we used to work by extraction, or tincture, cold infusion, hot infusion, semi-dynamic infusion, and all of that. And then from bitter vermouth to what, let's actually do something crazy. And we create this sort of collection of we used to call it the yeast tender, even because the bar was in East London. And it was a combination of different sort of ingredient that you wouldn't expect to have a result completely mind blowing. And one of my favorite was this pasito made
Okay,
from
very
beetroot.
Spanish.
Yeah, pasito wine, actually even barrel aged in a small Quercia Alba oak.
Yeah.
And it was made from beetroot and carrot, so not grape. And it was, that sweetness from the carrots and the beetroot. It just
Vegetable.
give you that, yeah, it's the same sensation of when you harvest the grape really late. Then they start fermenting already on the floor. Just with the wild yeast in
Of
the skin.
course.
Yeah, and there was, a few things like pear cider vermouths, or that sort of. Obviously, even some strawberry wine and raspberry.
You have to do
Explode.
it because it's delicious, first and foremost. So that's one of the reasons why you should always do that kind of.
Yeah, and also here in London, strawberry are a thing. I might be picky about a lot of food, but they have their berry. When it's season. So, Massi, I think I lost you again. I took in the show. The show is mine. Oh no, it's yours again.
Yeah. 1 second. 1 second.
No worry.
We're there. I'm texting you, man. This live.
No worry. It's the it's the beauty of the live show.
What happened there?
So I think my connection is actually all right. Yeah, because there you go. I keep on taking the show. Well, in the meantime, we are waiting for our special guest, Massi. I'm just gonna carry on and explain how did I get to whiskey, I guess. So as a bartender, so Massi, just carry on with the with the answer. So I would say, as a bartender, I was really curious, homemade ingredient and such. But before we were doing homemade ingredient, I wanted to make sure that whatever we were trying to reproduce wasn't available in the market. Now, obviously, it's really, really complicated and almost impossible to be update to any sort of liqueur and vermouth that can be available. But we had a quite simple rule in the bar, 3 rules pretty much. First, the barback is the star, so always respect him. Second, it's all about the customer, and the service. But the third rule, which was more focused for bartender, was you're not allowed to use any bottle if you don't know exactly everything you need to know behind it. So, even if you do a simple daiquiri, and you have, I don't know, Havana Club, great. What sort of rum is that? Is that column steel, posteel, molasses, sugarcane? How long it's been aged, it's been filtered, or and all of that.
What's the style? Because
exactly,
actually all those little things, they make a huge difference to the final flavor. So
exactly,
makes totally sense.
And then even the sugar, what type of sugar you use, Muscovado, whatever you want to choose. And we had different options of sugar, and even the lime, for instance. We were like, we were trying at the beginning for a small period of time to monitoring the pH of the lime. Because we understood that then there is two way to assemble those lime in a box. It's like class A and class B, and it's all to do with the zest and the juice inside. And you might have 30 different countries in one box. So the pH, it can be so different. It can be a sweet lime, can be a bitter lime. So I don't believe a daiquiri should be fresh squeezed lime juice. Period. No, taste your lime. Might be really sweet lime. You might need a bit more, or you might be a bit less sugar and so on. So
absolutely.
At the beginning we actually squeeze all the lime in the bottle, put in the fridge, wait 48 hours so you can actually stabilize the pH, and then correct the pH to make sure all the lime juice was the same pH. But then you sort of lose a bit of the natural flavor.
Right?
Yeah. So we just decide, okay, cool, we need to trust the bartender, but you need to make sure that you are conscious of the present moment, that everything you do determines your final product, and everything it can mess it up. It's just like shaking a bit longer and so on. So the idea was study as much as possible the back bar, and if possible, go to the source and see how they make it. So obviously that start, my sort of interest on cocktail competition, especially when the prize was to go and visit the distillery. And doing that, I went a lot of time in Ireland and Scotland, of course, even because they're quite close here. And I start to travel as much as possible to see the production and make as many questions as possible. Even stupid question, they're my favorite.
I don't really think there's any stupid question, man.
Exactly.
Also, what you just described is something that I really believe into it, and it's basically a theory of a system based on knowledge. And when you base everything in knowledge, you will just get better. There's nothing else. Like knowing what you're putting inside the drink, and knowing that you want to know more. It's always the secret of creating a great cocktail program, a great food program. Be a good fermenter. I think even be good in anything that you want to be good at, because that's the way that you really analyze things and get into things, right?
No, absolutely. And I think the main reason why a customer go to the bar to get a drink is not because the drink is better. It might be better than you to make an old fashioned. It might be, doing so many cocktail at home, then it might blow your mind how good it is. But I go to the bar because the passion that
Of
you get
course.
from the bartender, you know,
And
and
also,
obviously, sorry, no, go ahead.
and also, no, they understand, that if you always creating new things, there will always be a new thing that they didn't try before. And this is
Yeah,
something that, for instance, I've seen from 21 years working behind the bars. People coming just for that reason. What's new? And
yeah.
when the bar, and actually put yourself in a challenge that you got to do something new, because if you don't, you would disappoint some of your best people, or even your staff. I don't know, when you, for instance, you train many people and you train to be better. You got to be, I'm not saying better than them, but you got to be on top of the situation, because you're gonna get challenged. And
Oh
I
yeah.
believe that's the beauty of be there and be challenged. And I've been competing for 12 years now, and actually yesterday I entered to the perfectionist patron, which
Oh
is
wow.
I only had two competition I didn't enter, which is the old Bacardis. And now I do competition in this way. Well, I like that. I've never done this before. I'm just gonna do it for fun. I'm like, this mindset for me of being stressed of competing, it's so gone that I love to compete just because I have an idea, just because I have a drink, just because I didn't do that competition, or just because I like that competition. And this is the process that I got through. People tell me what's new.
Well, something that I miss so much are cocktail competition. I was one of these guys, and I don't want to sound cocky, but I never been scared of a cocktail competition. I was thrilled, which is different. I was super excited, and that sort of shaking hand. It was because, oh God, there's so much knowledge in this room. There's so many
Absolutely.
people, then they came out with a crazy idea. And for me, I didn't entirely won if I didn't come back, without learning something from
Absolutely.
other bartender.
The first
And
time I used dry ice in my life was the UK final of world class with a room of
oh, wow.
200 people inside. I never touched dry ice before.
Well, I
And
hope you didn't touch it.
I didn't touch, no. But I was like, now is the time to use it. And yes, I was shaking. Yes,
Yeah.
I was worried because I believe I had a good drink. And I actually went top four because of that, and because of the
Nice.
presentation, and because of, I actually explained this is the first time ever I use dry ice in a drink. And I wanted to do it here because this is the most important competition that I ever compete yet. And I believe this is the way. And again, this comes from a customer coming to your bar and telling you what's new. This is I believe is exactly the same mindset. It doesn't change at all. But anyway,
Yeah.
so with cocktail competitions, how bourbon, how rye, why this love for bourbon and rye, why not
So,
gin, why not tequila, why not other things?
well, they actually they are linked together. So
For sure.
about 3 years ago, there was a cocktail competition, which was the Rebel Yell bourbon competition, and I decided to enter. And it was quite a long time I didn't do competition. I was like, oh, I want to see if I still got it. And I came out with a drink. The idea was to it was a really simple drink, to be fair. It was a homemade syrup, whiskey, and I did a duck eggs, but I put it in one of those, those cookie containers that you can suck the air out,
Yes,
and and
perfect.
keep the yeah. So I put around the duck egg winter spice, cinnamon, cloves, and so on. And I remove all the air, and I put the eggs in there for about 2 or 3 days. And when you crack the egg to do a flip, the egg actually became brown
Has the
because
flavor.
absorb all the flavor from the spice. And I wanted to explain, this is for me is the closest thing that I can get for the reaction of an oak barrel when it's aging the whiskey. And just did a simple flip like that. They liked it, and there was the trip on the distillery, which
Nice.
back then it wasn't even ready. So I went there. There was a column still, not even
A pot still.
actually, yeah, it
Not
was
even a
like
pot
part of the
still.
column. It was it was a building site. It was crazy. And I realized then that was when I went in Kentucky. Was the day of the inauguration of the name of the distillery as a brick in the Kentucky Hall right there in Bardstown. So I actually been there when they put the brick down,
That's
and
amazing.
and they break the ground. So and I was like, okay, cool, this is great. They offered me to visit a different distillery, and there was the Kentucky Trail, and they asked me what distillery you want to visit. I was like, oh, wait a second, so you gonna let me choose what distillery I want to visit? If I want to go to Maker's Mars or Wild Turkey, or I was like, yeah, of course, you name it. I was like, okay, how does it work? Because I thought you were competing each other. I was like, well, yes and no. We believe that the category Kentucky bourbon should grow together,
Absolutely.
and we are deeply respect what other people do. And I believe, you as a bartender, you're here because you deserve to we should answer as many questions as possible. And if we cannot, you wanna see elsewhere. We are here to support you. And I was actually quite touched about it, because I was like, well, yeah, that's actually something.
I was lucky enough to be in the part of the world 2.5 years ago when I won the Woodford competition. So
Oh wow.
yeah, I won the Perfect Manhattan here in Canada. So I went to Kentucky. It was actually my first time, and I'd never been before for many reasons. Like sometimes travels is all about the brands that you're competing with. And I never compete with for a bourbon brand. And I was really actually got to Woodford does exactly the same. It's not just about Woodford. It's really about the land. It's really about they call it the land, the kind of category in a whole, which is amazing. Also, lots of rye. Ryes are growing crazy now. It's an amazing emerging category, I believe, in the last 5 years.
I'm really glad about it.
You prefer bourbon or rye?
It's really hard to say. It's for me, to be fair, there is no a style that I prefer one another. It's like saying, do you have a favorite spirit? No, it depends on the mood, of the season, of of where I am, the environment. A lot of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not a guy then, for instance, ask a Boulevardier or a Manhattan in a beach. No, I enjoyed my mojito.
Yeah, if it's a well executed mojito,
exactly,
a good executed mojito is a banging drink. I always say I love strawberry daiquiri if they're done properly. But unfortunately, the reflection of the world is totally different, because not many bars that do it properly, because it's one of those club drinks. The first time that you get into fermentation in bourbon, tell me the sour mash, when you understood how impactful is the actually sour mash to the end product, which it was something that when I learned, I was like, I didn't think there was so much going on through the first kind of process to bring it to the final bottling, which actually is huge, right?
It is. So I believe, first of all, when I learned about whiskey, it was actually in Ireland, in Middleton. So I studied the fermentation of the distilled beer through the wort. And, the main difference, as we know, on the wort, they sort of remove all this, let's say, all the organic part, and they just keep the sugary water that start the fermentation with.
Of course.
The sour mash is with the piss, everything together. It's like this big porridge.
Yep. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like they do care about the sweetness, but mainly is actually the fat of the grains, right?
Yeah. So they leave there as many things as possible, because obviously something that we need to consider as well. The grain is really important, and if we believe in terroir for grape, we should do the same about grain. So when we go in Kentucky, for instance, and Kentucky corn is a native crops from Kentucky.
Yep,
exactly like rye is a native crop from North Europe, or Indiana, Mississippi, Maryland, and that's why those are the capital of rye whiskey production.
Absolutely,
it's really important to understand that a really good source of grain should keep the flavor as much as possible, in the product. And that's why, even bourbon, for instance, is not allowed to distill more than 80%. They want 20% of flavor of impurity into the spirits, because even, the sour mash and everything, it gets so much out of the grain. it would be a shame to distill it, as
So
high as a single grain.
just for the people that are listening, is that how that happened, the sour mash. So when we say sour mash, like we know it because we've been there, but many people didn't. In your words, how do they get the sour mash working and make it ferment?
Okay, so in my words, in simple words, right? So I would say, in simple words, we need to consider sour mash like a sort of. It's really different from the production of beer. A beer, for instance, for me would be more close to the wort, which is the distilled beer for single grain or single malt whiskey.
Beauty.
Sour mash is more like this sort of breakfast of champion with fermented grain left there pretty much whole, and make sure then the yeast react not just with yeast nutrients such as maltose and such, but even with a lot of fat and enzyme and a lot of different nutrients that are in the grain as a whole, and not just fermenting the sugar itself. So there is way more flavor in a way that you can extract. The way that the sour mash is working, I would say, to make it really simple and even a bit rude as an explanation, every mash starts as a sweet mash. And it's a mash because just like a mashed potato, you got piece of stuff inside. Yeah. And now when you actually put it there, this mash is actually sweet. Now, when they start the fermentation, and obviously, the yeast start to convert the sugar in alcohol and produce the CO2 as a reaction and so on, the pH drop, and the sour, the mash becomes sour. Now, to keep that sort of, sour mash technique, which actually in Kentucky they most of the time call it the satback, you keep part of this fermentation left over from the fermentation tank to add it to the next batch of fermentation, because that sort of batch of fermented grain have an acidic environment, which will protect the yeast to be attacked from bacteria that are not necessarily good bacteria.
Absolutely, and also create the the unique flavor of the brand.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so funny because the first time someone explained me that, it was a very long time ago. I was not really into fermentation at all, and I was like, "Oh man, this is like a Solera system style." And after when you start fermenting, you understand that everything is like a Solera system style. You always need to keep your back slop, because there is, and if you go to a restaurant, for instance, that there's a mother stock. Mother stock is so famous. Every single good restaurant has a mother stock, or at least the restaurant I worked. And it's exactly the same principle, because it's what gives you the identity of your flavor profile, of your bourbon or rye, or for instance, for your dishes, right? It's so fundamental. People that understand that whatever, and sourdough. Think about sourdough; it's exactly the same. My sourdough starter is 2 years old, and I would never switch it for anything else, because it really gives you that proper flavor. And this is obviously along the actual sour mash is fermented for instance, the bourbons, normal bourbons, but more bourbons and rye that you actually look after.
So usually it's between 3 to 5 days, but there are some distillery. So this distillery is called so it's actually a laboratory called Yeast Farm Solution, and they develop this yeast that then is super strong and super fast, and it can actually do a full process of fermentation, sour mash, in less than 24 hours. Now.
That's true.
Now, obviously, that's on one side really, really good for speeding the production. On the other is, if I think about slow fermentation, you got quite a lot more coming from that. And I remember I spent a month in Japan just for my personal pleasure, and enjoy the culture there.
Great pleasure, I guess.
Yeah. And it was 1 month really intense, because every day I was pretty much on the train, at 6 o'clock in the morning, visiting another village. I wanted to see as much I could.
I would have done that.
Yeah. And I had the pleasure and the honor to be hosted by Kimio, which is the owner of Akashitai brewery.
Beautiful.
So sake, and
Of course,
and,
huge
yeah,
tons, huge volumes, right?
exactly. And and he was one of the most incredible person I never met. He was incredible, even because he literally opened the brewery just for me. And he came and picked me up, and then he brought me there and he showed me around. It was just me and him. I was like, so sorry, why is only me and you? Oh, August, so we close. August not good for fermenting. It disturbs our yeast. I was like, so you actually literally just open it for show me around? Oh yes, a great honor. And this is like mind blowing, because we Italian, we
Absolutely.
told that we know
Never
about
do that.
hospitality. Yeah,
We would never do that. Like the guy was
exactly.
like, "It's August. Who's this guy?
Yeah,
It's Ferragosto, man.
exactly.
I'm gonna be on the beach. This guy can wait another month." But
Exactly.
that's the difference. And also another thing that came on my side, which obviously you just told me the story. I tell you, man, they stop fermenting in August, and probably the biggest beer in Japan, or one of the top three, right? And they still don't actually ferment because it's not good for the yeast.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's not even a mass production. It is a mass production, but it's so calculated that
yeah,
whenever it's not good for the yeast, they treat it like a proper thing. It's
yeah.
amazing. Like I think it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. And obviously, it was really interesting as well to actually see the production of sake. I understand a bit of the koji. And how they turn actually. How they make sure then the sugar from the rice can actually be fermented. And in those
Exactly.
big fermentation tank, they have a turbine inside, which was actually cooling down the fermentation. And that's
True.
just to slow the fermentation, because during the hot time,
Of
and
course, it will kick off, especially with koji. You can kick off in around 12 hours. It can get
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So he told me then the slower the fermentation, the more flavor you have. But that's not necessarily a good thing. It depends on what types of rice you use and how polished is it, and
Absolutely.
if you want to age it or not, and so on. And it was like everything, every step, and every small detail is give you a completely different product if you need. So in terms of how fast the yeast can work, well, I believe it can work really fast and can work really slow. It depends of what product you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
Makes total sense.
going back on the first time that I saw a sour mash, and I understand the importance of especially the yeast in Kentucky. It was in the Limestone Branch Distillery, and it's one of my favorite story, because it's incredible, and it sounds just like a made up story. But if you go there at the Limestone Branch, sometimes you actually even can see this yeast container, yeast jug that I mention all the time. So what happened pretty much then? Steve Beam and Paul Beam, which they are directly descended of Jacob Beam, they owned the Limestone Branch Distillery, and they wanted to recreate Yellowstone bourbon, which is a really old bourbon. It's actually dating back of the 1792. To make sure that they had the same ingredient and everything, they built the distillery exactly as it was. You back. So I was saying, they wanted to recreate bourbon, Yellowstone bourbon, exactly as it used to be made back in the 1792. So they have, a postio in the distillery, and it's incredible because it's literally until few weeks ago, it was just one, maybe 2 barrel production a day in a production of bourbon. That's insane. And they have, this notebook from, generation from, Guy Beam and so on, with all the recipe, all the bourbon of the Beam and such. So they wanted to make sure that the same, corn was used, the same sort of grain, the same, ratio, the same fermentation, the same, distillation and everything. But they didn't have the yeast. And as you mentioned, the yeast is pretty much the DNA of, of the whiskey
Absolutely.
or the sourdough and all the
Absolutely.
rest. So they went in the Oscar Getz Museum, and they find this yeast container belonged to Minor Case Beam, which was his great grandfather. And back then, you used to just give to generation by generation this yeast
Absolutely.
jug.
Yep.
And it was, the yeast jug, especially on the bean family, the bean was like sort of famous to sleep with this jug, the yeast jug, more than his wife, because you will
that
protect
was his business, I guess.
yeah, exactly. And you used to put it, in down the bell, just to keep it underwater, to keep it right, on that temperature. So when they find this jug, which was, a century old, and it was probably, belonged to the very first beam. We don't know that, but definitely prior prohibitionists. They wanted to reactivate this yeast, which obviously it's been in the museum for so long, it was absolutely dead. So they tried, there was nothing they could do. And that's how they actually met the guy from his farm solution.
Perfect. Because you want to recreate the same kind of environment and same acidity, I guess.
So they did the only thing that you could do, and you can only do it today with the technologies today. This chemist laboratory, they have the DNA, the yeast from a lot of distillery, and they keep it there as a database just in case a catastrophe will happen.
Of course.
They have they have all the 4 yeast of 4 roses, and all the yeast that you can find. So they analyzed this jug, and they even ran out of time because they needed to bring it back to the museum and such. And they extracted a sample of that jug, and they did a DNA match with the yeast present in the atmosphere today. And based on that, they recreate, Yellowstone based on the same yeast of I don't know how many centuries ago.
That's amazing.
And I was just like, it was incredible.
See, that's the beauty of the new technology of today, man. When they use it in the right way, we can really discover new thing. We got another 4 minutes. Anyways, I just want to know, what's the future for you, man? What's what are you up to? You still obviously bourbon rye strong? You work in a bar? You back working behind the bar? Or have you ever stopped to work behind the bar? I don't know. So I'm just asking you, what's the future for Michele, bro?
So I love to work behind the bar when it's possible, and that's why I like to organize takeover. With our brands. I looking over like more than 27 whiskey in a way, and tequilas as well. But Loxco has been extremely good with me, and I believe I find a company to stick with.
Nice.
Now, especially then we merge with NGP. Things are changed for the better. There is a lot of opportunity for us to grow together. There's a lot of brand that needs a lot of love, and I'm happy to put it under my wing.
Do you look after? Do you look after all London, or do you go even north?
All Europe.
Europe. Yeah. That's amazing. So you actually go and that's amazing. Go to like Manchester, man. Send the love to Manchester. I'm a Manchester boy.
Okay, so, definitely.
I will love organize more things because you look very passionate about what you do, which is I think is a synonym of that you feel successful, which is amazing. Are you gonna compete again? Are you gonna do because you can compete against, right?
It depends. Yeah. Well, so they are being really good with me, and it's something that I've been asked, at the beginning, like, can I do competition? And it was like, okay, well, if you are not going, to compete for a brand that is the direct competition, that's fine. So, at the beginning it was, okay, well, you can compete for a gin, you can compete for a vodka, and all those stuff. But now that we merge, I have a gin, I have a vodka, I have a tequila, I have all the category. So it will be hard.
What's do you want to go global? Do you want to get a global ambassador? Or do you want to
honestly, it's not. I'm not a guy. Then I'm not aimed for a bigger title, or I'm not that sort of guy. For me, as long I can learn, and and I can get more of that experience, not just knowledge, even actually traveling, and visit those distillery and working close with the with the master distiller, which I did. I did a full process of distillation and fermentation in both our distillery. That's for me is what I want to go with. So the more they grow, the more I want to grow with them. And follow them step by step.
Man, that's amazing. I wish you the best of luck for anything. It was amazing to speak to you. Really, I didn't
Thank
know
you.
you before personally, and man, you sound like you sound real. And more than anything, I can see that you got your goal. You're humble on processing your kind of path, which is amazing. Whenever I will come to UK, if you're based there, I will message you. If you ever come to Toronto, you gotta come to my bar. I'll come with you. We'll have a couple of Negronis or couple of old fashions. Depends how do we feel. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much
Thank
also
you.
to host my podcast for a while,
Oh, of course.
which
Don't
is
worry.
which it was
I got you.
it was just an extra. So thank you so much. Really, I wish you all the best for your future. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Massi. All right. Well, take
have a
care.
good
Thanks
one.
again.
Keep
Cheers.
fermenting. Never stop fermenting.
Never.
Bye, buddy. Take care, eh?